Hello, everyone, and welcome to Whispered Abyss. Relax, settle in, and get ready as we dive into tonight's story. Let the darkness take you, and let's begin. I never believed in midnight visitors until that Christmas Eve when everything changed. Snow fell lightly outside as I settled into my parents' living room, a mug of hot cocoa warming my hands. My dad had turned in early, exhausted from stringing lights all day, and Mom was in the kitchen, humming along to soft Christmas tunes. Everything felt cozy until I heard a soft knock at the front door. At first, I assumed it was a late-night caroler, or maybe a neighbor dropping off cookies. But when I opened the door, no one was there. Instead, only fresh footprints leading away from the porch caught my attention, quickly disappearing into the darkness. Right then, a chill shot through my spine. Someone had been standing out in the cold, knocking, and then vanished. I called out a tentative hello into the night. Silence. A single street lamp flickered, casting an eerie glow onto the newly fallen snow. There was no response, no car idling by, nothing that explained those footprints. My heart thumped in my chest, but I told myself I was overreacting. It was Christmas Eve, and I was probably just seeing things. Trying to ignore the unease, I double-checked the lock and went back inside. My mom poked her head out of the kitchen, concerned. "Everything all right?" she asked. I forced a smile and nodded. I didn't want to worry her, especially since my older brother Noah was due any minute from his late shift at the fire station. Once he was home, I figured any sense of fear would vanish, but the strange knock wouldn't leave my mind. While the soft crackle of the fireplace brought a semblance of warmth, my thoughts kept drifting back to those footprints. Why knock and then leave? Who would be out in this weather at such an hour? What I didn't realize was that the footprints outside were just the beginning. Something, or someone, was lurking in our quiet neighborhood this Christmas Eve, and they were far from finished. Not long after that unsettling knock, I heard the front door open again, this time from someone using a key. A wave of relief washed over me, and I rushed to the hallway. My brother Noah stepped inside, stomping his boots free of snow. He was still in his fire department coat, carrying a small gift bag in one hand. "Anyone else show up?" he asked, setting his bag down. "The roads are practically empty tonight." I hesitated, considering whether to mention the footprints. At first, I shrugged it off. "No one's come in," I said, trying to sound casual. But Noah's eyes flicked over to the door, then to my face. He could sense something was off. "Someone knocked," I finally admitted. But when I opened the door, no one was there, just footprints going around the corner. He frowned. "This neighborhood's always been quiet, especially on Christmas Eve. You sure it wasn't a prank?" Before I could answer, a sudden flicker overhead grabbed our attention. The lights in the living room dimmed for a split second, like a power surge. My mom emerged from the kitchen, drying her hands on a towel. She asked if we'd seen the lights flicker too. Noah set his coat down and glanced out the window. "We had a few call-outs this past week for downed lines," he explained. "Maybe the storm is messing with the power." But his words didn't reassure me. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. To break the tension, Mom offered Noah some dinner and asked me to keep an eye on the thermostat. She didn't know how unsettled I was, or maybe she was just trying to distract me. But as I headed into the hallway, I thought I saw movement outside the window, a quick shadow gliding past. My heart thumped harder. I flicked on the porch light and peered outside, hoping for some sign of a neighborhood cat or a gust of wind. Nothing. Only that single set of footprints was visible, leading off into the snowy dark. A strange warning shot through my mind. This was more than a prank, and whoever was out there might be watching our every move. After dinner, the three of us settled in the living room to watch an old Christmas movie on TV. My dad was still sleeping upstairs, so we kept the volume low, but I couldn't focus on the screen. Every pop and creak of the house made me twitch. Noah sat with his legs stretched out, absently tapping his fingers against the sofa arm. Mom sipped tea, glancing at me with a worried expression. She must have sensed my nerves. Halfway through the movie, our holiday lights outside started flickering in sync with the TV's glow. At first, we chalked it up to the storm messing with the power, but then Mom's phone chimed with a text alert. She picked it up, squinted at the screen, and frowned. "It's from one of our neighbors," she said slowly. "They saw someone standing at our fence a few minutes ago." My heart raced. Could it be a lost passerby? Noah shook his head, setting down his mug. We don't usually get random people in this neighborhood, especially not on Christmas Eve. And they knocked earlier, right? Suddenly, an unexpected crash from the backyard made us jump. Noah shot up from his seat, and we all rushed to the window. Nothing but the faint glow of the Christmas lights illuminated the yard. Branches swayed in the wind, creating shadows that looked like grasping hands against the snow. Then I spotted it. The garden gnome that always guarded our bird bath lay toppled, half buried in snow. It didn't look like wind had knocked it over. It was too heavy for that. Yet no sign of anyone was out there, just more footprints leading from the fence to the gnome, and then vanishing. Noah headed for the door, a determined look in his eyes. "Stay inside," he told Mom and me. "Lock the door behind me. I'm going to see if whoever did this is still around." As he stepped out into the cold, I felt a jolt of fear. My brother was level-headed, strong, even brave. But something about that lonely figure outside the fence unsettled me in ways I couldn't explain. And if Noah couldn't handle it, I wasn't sure what we'd do next. Minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness after Noah stepped out. Mom hovered near the door, repeatedly checking the lock. I lingered by the window, scanning the yard for movement. The quiet was absolute. No car engines, no distant chatter, not even a dog barking somewhere down the street. All I could hear was the steady hum of our space heater and my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. Suddenly, the porch light wavered, dimming for a moment before flaring back to life. In that brief second of darkness, I thought I saw a shadow dart across the yard, a quick flash of movement at the edge of the fence. My stomach churned as I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the eye. Then I caught sight of Noah. He stood by the bird bath, turning in slow circles like he was trying to make sense of the footprints in the snow. He lifted his phone flashlight, casting a narrow beam across the drifts. The footprints were more numerous than I realized, crisscrossing the yard in a weird pattern. They seemed to spiral around the gnome before leading off into the neighbor's yard. Just as I was about to tell Mom to call out to him, Noah's flashlight flickered, and he turned quickly toward the fence. I pressed my forehead against the cold window, straining to see what he was looking at. The reflection from the living room lights obscured my view, but I could have sworn I saw a figure, tall and wrapped in a long coat, watching him from beyond the fence. Before I could catch a clearer glimpse, the figure dropped behind the fence, vanishing into the neighboring yard. Noah sprinted over to investigate, but he stopped short as if he were debating whether to continue the chase. An uneasy sensation settled over me. Whoever was out there seemed careful, maybe even calculating. And they definitely wanted us to know they were close by. I wondered how long they'd been watching us and what their real purpose was on this cold, silent Christmas Eve. A faint rush of wind raked the side of the house, rattling the window panes. Mom turned off the TV and moved closer to me. Her eyes were tense, but she tried to stay calm. "Maybe we should call the police," she whispered, glancing at the clock. It was only 10 p.m., early by Christmas Eve standards, but the night already felt like it stretched on endlessly. Noah came back inside, brushing snow off his coat. His breath formed small clouds in the cold air. "Whoever it was disappeared into the next yard," he said, closing the door behind him. I couldn't see a face, just a shape, too dark. I noticed his hands trembling slightly, and that made me nervous. Noah wasn't one to scare easily. He'd run into burning buildings after all. But something about this had him unsettled. Mom picked up her phone, hesitated, then dialed 911. She explained there was a trespasser lurking around our property. The operator promised to send a patrol car, but warned there might be a delay because of the icy roads. "Don't go outside again," she urged us, "and keep your doors locked." The house settled into an uncomfortable silence. Even the heater seemed to run more quietly than usual. My dad still slept upstairs, oblivious. Part of me wanted to rush up and wake him, but I didn't want to cause more panic. Outside, the Christmas lights still blinked in gentle patterns, as if mocking our fear. Suddenly, a low scraping noise traveled along the back wall of the living room. It sounded like metal against wood. We froze, exchanging anxious glances. "The window," Noah mouthed, motioning for us to stay where we were. Heart pounding, I followed him to the other side of the room. Noah grabbed the long fire poker from beside the fireplace. Mom and I stood behind him, adrenaline surging. Slowly, he pulled the curtains back an inch. For the briefest second, I saw something, a face or a reflection, pressed against the glass. Then it was gone, leaving behind just a frosted imprint of breath on the window. For a few seconds, the three of us stood there, staring at the fading breath mark on the glass. Even the blinking Christmas lights seemed to pause in that moment, as if holding their own breath. I wondered if whoever was out there could hear my heart pounding in the silence. Abruptly, the floor creaked upstairs. My dad was awake. Or so we hoped. Mom hurried to the base of the staircase and called out softly, "Jim? Honey?" But there was no reply. Tension coiled in my stomach like a tight spring. No emotion for us to stay close as we crept up the steps. The hallway light was on, casting a faint glow under the bedroom door. From inside, we heard soft shuffling. Mom nudged the door open, ready to tell Dad about the intruder. Instead, we found the room empty. The bed covers were tossed aside, and the window leading to the small balcony was unlocked, slightly ajar. Snow had blown in, leaving a thin dusting on the windowsill. A cold dread filled my chest. My dad never used that balcony, especially in winter. It was rickety at best. Yet, footprints in the drift showed someone had stepped outside. Noah lunged over to the window, pushing it wider. Through the swirling snow, we could see clear footprints on the balcony, leading to the ladder Dad kept for fixing gutters. The ladder now lay half lowered to the yard below. But there was no sign of Dad, no dark figure, nothing. Mom's voice quivered. "Oh God, where is he?" Before any of us could answer, we heard a faint sound from the backyard, like something metal dropping onto frozen ground. The same scraping noise echoed again, and a flicker of movement caught our eye in the distance. Through the gusts of snow, we saw two shapes in the yard below. One figure stood rigid and imposing. The other was slumped, leaning against the fence. Noah's hand tightened around the fire poker. Without another word, he spun on his heels and raced downstairs, Mom and me right behind him. My pulse hammered with each step, every fiber of my being screaming that we needed to be careful. Yet I knew we couldn't just leave Dad out there. We had to face whoever, or whatever, was waiting in the darkness of our snowy backyard. We burst into the backyard, the cold biting at our faces. Snow swirled in the wind, and our Christmas lights blinked weakly against the darkness. My breath caught in my throat as I spotted Dad crumpled against the fence. Noah rushed forward, dropping the fire poker as he kneeled by Dad's side. His face was pale, eyes closed. A bruise was forming on his forehead, and he had a small cut on his cheek. He stirred slightly when Noah shook his shoulder. Mom gasped and glanced around for the other figure. For a terrifying moment, I thought the intruder had vanished without a trace, until movement at the edge of our property drew my attention. The figure stood there, tall and unsettlingly still, staring at us through the gusting snow. Under the flickering yard light, I could make out a dark hood pulled low over their face. The entire moment felt surreal. The intruder just a few paces away, making no move to run or speak. My heart thumped wildly. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice cracking. "Why are you doing this?" No reply. The figure raised a gloved hand, almost like a wave or a gesture to keep quiet. It was eerie, calm, deliberate, too self-assured for someone caught in the act. Then, as sirens wailed faintly in the distance, the intruder turned and vanished into the neighbor's yard, leaving fresh footprints in the untouched snow. Their silhouette disappeared behind the fence as if it had never been there at all. I rushed to Dad's side while Mom fumbled with her phone, trembling as she updated the dispatcher. Dad's eyes blinked open, disoriented. He muttered about hearing noises and seeing someone climb the balcony. He'd gone outside to investigate and was taken by surprise. By the time the police arrived, the footprints had mostly faded under a new dusting of snow. The ladder lay tipped over, and the back gate stood ajar. An officer knelt by the fence, shining a flashlight on fresh boot prints that eventually just ended. No clear direction, like the intruder had simply melted into the night. They took our statements, then helped my dad inside, promising to patrol the neighborhood. We spent the rest of Christmas Eve locked in a tense silence, huddled together in the living room. Any sense of holiday cheer had vanished. It was a night of fear and unanswered questions. Who had come knocking at our door? What did they want? And why choose our family on the night we were supposed to feel most at peace? Sometimes, when I think back on that night, I remember how the snow seemed to glow red and green from the Christmas lights and how silent everything felt. Even when I was screaming inside, the intruder was never identified, just another cautionary tale told in hushed voices. And though the yard eventually healed under the winter's freeze, the memory of that lonely figure, staring with such intent, remains etched in my mind. Our once cozy Christmas Eve had been transformed by a stranger's chilling presence, a reminder that even on the happiest nights of the year, something dark can lurk just beyond the glow. Ellie had always loved the sound of church bells on Christmas Eve. That gentle ringing brought her back to childhood, a time when the holiday felt pure and magical. But this year, something was off. As she made her way through the snowy streets toward her family's old Victorian house, the bells sounded hollow, almost foreboding. She stepped onto the creaking porch and noticed the door was slightly ajar. That was strange. Her parents were usually meticulous about keeping the house locked. She called out, "Mom? Dad?" but got no response. The hallway lights were on, revealing a trail of wet footprints leading from the entryway to the living room. Ellie's parents should have been enjoying their annual Christmas tradition, hot chocolate and a crackling fire. Yet the silence was unnerving. Setting her keys on the side table, Ellie followed the footprints. With every step, a jolt of fear ran through her. The footprints were fresh. Someone had entered moments ago. She froze when she saw the living room window open wide, letting in frigid air that turned her breath to mist. Snow dusted the sill. The logs in the fireplace lay cold and untouched. In the distance, the church bells rang again. The wind carried the faintest echo of a holiday carol, but it only deepened the sense of dread gnawing at her. Ellie glanced at her phone, tempted to call the police, but hesitated. Maybe her parents had gone out for a quick errand and forgotten to close the door. That had to be it, right? Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She peered out the window into the darkness, searching for any movement. For a fleeting moment, she thought she saw a silhouette standing near the lamppost across the street. When she blinked, it was gone. Ellie closed the window and tried to steady her breathing. With Christmas lights twinkling weakly around her, she felt an overwhelming certainty. Someone else was here, in this house, and she had to find her parents before that someone found her. Ellie's phone buzzed in her jacket pocket, jolting her out of her tense standstill. The screen lit up with her mom's name, and she answered in a shaky whisper, relief fluttering through her. "Mom, where are you?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. A static hiss filled the line, followed by the faint sound of ragged breathing. Then, a voice, low and trembling. "Ellie, don't stay there. The line went dead. Ellie's heart pounded. Her mom sounded terrified, and it didn't even sound like she was calling from somewhere safe. She tried calling back, but the call went straight to voicemail. A sense of dread rooted in her stomach. Something was very wrong. She rushed to the hallway, checking the bedrooms and kitchen. Nothing. No sign of her parents. The wet footprints continued to track along the carpet, disappearing into the dimly lit den. The Christmas tree stood near the window, half decorated, the lights blinking erratically, as if the power was about to surge. It felt as though the house itself was warning her to get out. Summoning courage, Ellie flicked on every light she could find, hoping the warmth of the glow might soothe her nerves. But each illuminated room only revealed emptiness. The front door was still ajar, letting in a brisk draft that made the holiday decorations sway. A sudden knock, loud and urgent, resounded from the back door. Ellie froze, her mind racing. Was it her parents returning, a concerned neighbor, or something far more threatening? She glanced toward the den where the footprints disappeared, then back at the door, unsure which possibility frightened her more. Ellie crept toward the back door, her body tense. The knock came again, harsher this time, as if whoever was out there was growing impatient. She braced herself and peered through the curtain. A face loomed on the other side, a middle-aged man wearing a heavy coat and a concerned expression. She recognized him as Mr. Alvarez, the neighbor from 2 houses down. "Ellie," he called, pressing a gloved hand to the glass. "You okay?" The front door was open. "Thought I saw someone inside." Ellie unlatched the door and cracked it open, the bitter winter air rushing in. "Mr. Alvarez, my parents are missing," she blurted, trying to keep the panic from her voice. "There were footprints and someone was here. I found the window open and..." She realized she was rambling, but Mr. Alvarez's expression grew grim. "I heard something strange earlier, like a scream, or maybe just the wind. And then I noticed the lights in your house flickering," he explained, glancing around the kitchen. "Let's check the rest of the house together. We'll find your folks." Ellie nodded, relieved not to be alone. The two of them moved through the rooms, Mr. Alvarez calling out for her parents, but no answer came. They found no signs of a break-in other than the open door and window. Yet the footprints in the carpet and the half-decorated tree felt like silent witnesses, hinting that this was more sinister than a simple accident. A low moan from the den suddenly caught their attention, like someone was hurt or trying to speak from the other side of a wall. "Stay behind me," Mr. Alvarez said, stepping cautiously toward the sound. Each Christmas light flickered in sync with Ellie's pounding heart. She tried to steady herself, gripping the edge of the sofa for balance. Just then, the TV turned on by itself, broadcasting nothing but static. It hissed in a strangely rhythmic way, almost as if someone was trying to form words. The moans sounded again, closer this time, directly behind the den's locked storage door. Mr. Alvarez's hand shook as he reached for the storage doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. Ellie stood behind him, her breath hitching every time another raspy moan sounded from within. The TV's static grew louder, filling the den with an unsettling hum. She fought the urge to cover her ears, focusing instead on the door, her only barrier to whatever was making that sound. "There's no keyhole," Mr. Alvarez muttered under his breath, rattling the door gently. He looked around, spotted a small tool set on a side table, and grabbed a flathead screwdriver. As he started prying at the latch, Ellie flicked on the overhead light, only to have it stutter and go out completely. Darkness swallowed the room, leaving them with only the glow from the TV's static and the faint twinkle of Christmas lights outside. The door handle groaned under the force of the screwdriver, and a final yank popped the latch free. A sharp draft of cold air rushed from inside, making Ellie's skin prickle. Mr. Alvarez swung the door open. The storage space was cramped and mostly empty, its walls lined with old boxes of holiday ornaments and photo albums. At first, Ellie didn't see anything unusual until she realized one box was overturned and a thin smear of something dark led behind it. She bit her lip, forcing herself to step closer. Shining her phone's flashlight, she caught a glimpse of a figure slumped in the far corner. Someone huddled on the floor, their face hidden by the shadows. Her heart thundered. Was it one of her parents, or something else entirely? Steeling her nerves, Ellie took a shaky step forward. The figure stirred, emitting another low moan. Its head lifted slightly, revealing recognition. Ellie's eyes widened. She knew this face. But before she could speak, a crash sounded from elsewhere in the house, followed by the sharp crack of something heavy hitting the floor. A heartbeat later, the power surged back on, flooding the den with glaring light. In that instant, the storage room figure shrank back, letting out a ragged gasp that sent fresh terror coursing through Ellie's veins. Ellie's eyes adjusted to the sudden flood of light, revealing her father lying on the storage room floor, clutching his side. Blood stained his sweater, and his face was ashen. He tried to speak, but his voice came out in ragged gasps. She darted toward him, dropping to her knees. Mr. Alvarez hovered nearby, horror etched on his features. "Dad!" Ellie whispered urgently, pressing her hand against his wound. "Where's Mom? What happened?" He grimaced, breathing shallowly. "I heard a noise, went to check," he managed, each word a struggle. "Someone hit me from behind and dragged me here." His eyes flicked to Mr. Alvarez, relief momentarily softening his pained expression. "Thank you for helping my daughter." Ellie's mind whirled. Their peaceful Christmas Eve had warped into a nightmare. She pulled out her phone again, intending to dial 911, but Mr. Alvarez gently halted her. "We'll call," he said, voice trembling, "but whoever did this could still be in the house. We need to be careful." Before Ellie could argue, another thud echoed from the hallway, followed by what sounded like footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps that seemed to linger just beyond the den. Mr. Alvarez stepped forward, motioning for Ellie to stay back with her father. The hairs on her arms stood on end as the footsteps paused, then resumed, heading toward the living room. Her father's grip tightened on her wrist. "Find your mother," he whispered, his eyes brimming with urgency. She ran when I got attacked." Torn between her father's condition and her missing mother, Ellie's pulse hammered in her ears. The overhead lights flickered again, threatening to plunge them back into darkness. Somewhere in the house, a door slammed shut with a jarring finality. The sense of being cornered weighed heavily on them all. Mr. Alvarez picked up a long metal flashlight he found on a nearby shelf, setting his jaw. "Stay with him," he told Ellie. "I'll check the living room." He left before she could protest, leaving Ellie kneeling beside her injured father, fear gnawing at her. She prayed help would come soon, but the uneasy feeling that the intruder was close by, maybe even watching, made every second feel painfully long. Ellie's father fought to stay conscious, but she saw the pain etched on his face. Still kneeling beside him, she gently pressed a clean kitchen towel against his side to slow the bleeding. Each shallow breath he took seemed like a small victory. In the hallway, Mr. Alvarez's flashlight beam danced across the walls as he moved toward the living room. Ellie strained her ears for any sign of a struggle or a voice, but the house remained eerily silent, broken only by the distant church bells tolling again outside. "Dad, hang on," she whispered, her throat tight with worry. She dialed 911, only to be placed on hold due to high call volume, probably a result of icy roads causing accidents around town. Her frustration grew, but she stayed on the line, not wanting to give up. Suddenly, Mr. Alvarez appeared in the doorway. He beckoned urgently, keeping his voice low. "Ellie, I found her. She's in the living room, behind the couch. She seems okay, but shaken up. I think we need to move your father somewhere safer until the police arrive." Ellie glanced down at her dad, who gave a weak nod, as though encouraging her to go check on her mom. "I'll be all right," he murmured. "Go." Heart pounding, she followed Mr. Alvarez back down the hall. The living room looked as if it had been ransacked. Ornaments scattered, a chair tipped over, the window still letting in the cold winter air. Behind the couch, her mom sat curled up, eyes wide with fear. When she saw Ellie, relief washed over her face. "Thank God," she breathed, standing on unsteady feet. She explained in hushed tones. "A figure came in through the window. Your dad tried to stop them, but they struck him. I screamed and ran, then everything went dark." "Did you see who it was?" Mr. Alvarez asked gently, scanning the room with his flashlight. Her mom shook her head, voice trembling. "No, they wore dark clothing, a hood pulled low. They just vanished after your father fell." A soft thud from the adjacent dining room made them all freeze. Ellie's mom gripped her hand tightly. Mr. Alvarez signaled for them to stay low, inching toward the noise. The same creeping sense of dread returned, sharper now, because whoever had invaded their home was still close by, and they seemed to know every shadowy corner of this old house. Mr. Alvarez inched toward the dining room doorway, flashlight trembling in his hand. Ellie and her mom followed slowly, breathing shallowly to keep as quiet as possible. The room was dim, only partially lit by a strand of Christmas lights dangling from a shelf. In that muted glow, Ellie spotted the intruder crouched near the kitchen door, just a silhouette, poised as if preparing to bolt. She felt her pulse hammer at the sight of this stranger who had turned their holiday upside down. Mr. Alvarez aimed the flashlight, illuminating a figure in dark clothing, hood still pulled low. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, without warning, the intruder took off into the kitchen. Footsteps echoed across the tile before a loud crash rang out. A chair toppled, pots clattered to the floor. Ellie's mom gasped as the intruder darted out the back door into the icy night. The distant tolling of church bells mixed with the sound of rapid footsteps crunching snow, then vanished into silence. Relief flooded Ellie, though fear still lingered. They rushed back to check on her dad, who remained in the den, leaning against the wall, his face lit with cautious relief when he saw them unharmed. Mr. Alvarez helped him onto a couch, and just then, the sound of sirens grew closer. Police lights flickered through the window, casting blue and red patterns on the half-decorated Christmas tree. Officers entered quickly, assessing the situation, and one immediately radioed for an ambulance for Ellie's father. Her mom explained as much as she could: the open window, the sudden assault, the figure in dark clothing. Another officer gently guided Ellie aside, asking for details while paramedics arrived to tend to her dad. He'd been hurt, but the wound looked manageable. Neighbors, drawn by the flashing lights, stood at a distance outside, some whispering about the break-in, others offering comfort. Though shaken, Ellie felt a measure of gratitude. They were alive, and together, and help had finally arrived. As the paramedics escorted her father to the waiting ambulance, Ellie caught a glimpse of the faint footprints on the snowy sidewalk. They led away into the darkness, toward the church bells that no longer seemed comforting. She knew the intruder might never be found, But at least for now, her family was safe. They would spend this Christmas Eve not by the fire, but in the emergency room. Yet even in that cold, fluorescent hospital hallway, Ellie held on to a small hope. After this terrifying night, they'd all be there for each other. An unbreakable bond forged through fear and ultimately, survival. A single note rang out across the silent street, the hollow sound of a distant chime echoing through the frosty air. Amelia paused under a flickering street lamp, her arms laden with Christmas gifts. She glanced around the quiet suburban cul-de-sac, expecting to see a neighbor stepping outside, but every house seemed dark and still. That was odd. Normally, holiday lights would be blazing and laughter would spill from homes hosting festive gatherings. Tonight, however, Amelia sensed something was amiss. Even her breath, visible in the chilly air, felt too loud. She hurried up the porch steps to her best friend Laura's house, where she'd been invited for a Christmas Eve potluck. As she reached the door, she heard the chime again. Just one singular note, like someone testing a piano key over and over. Her pulse quickened. Where was it coming from? She gave the doorknob a twist, surprised to find it unlocked. Inside, the living room was bright with decorations. A tall tree glittered with candy canes and ornaments, and a half-empty punch bowl sat on the dining table. Yet, no one was around. Amelia set her gifts down and called, "Laura?" No answer. She poked her head into the kitchen. Empty. The overhead light buzzed faintly, intensifying the uneasy hush. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was well past the time people should have arrived. Yet the place looked frozen in mid-celebration, as though someone had stepped away for just a moment. That single note chimed again, louder this time, making Amelia's heart lurch. Quick footsteps approached from outside the house, causing the floorboards on the porch to creak. Amelia rushed to the front window, half expecting to see more guests. Instead, she saw a silhouette in the dim glow of the street lamp, someone standing perfectly still, staring straight at the house. Her phone vibrated. She lifted it to see a single text message from Laura that read, "Don't open the door, don't let anyone in." Amelia's stomach churned. Someone, or something, was waiting out there in the snowy dark, and the night was only beginning. Amelia's heartbeat thundered. She glanced from Laura's cryptic text to the motionless figure outside the window. She'd never known her friend to be the paranoid type, so the warning felt dead serious. Her first instinct was to lock the door, but it was already shut. She flicked the deadbolt, ensuring no one could slip inside. Heart pounding, she crept toward the living room curtains. The silhouette remained standing under the street lamp, face obscured by darkness, almost as if waiting for a signal. Amelia shuddered at the thought. Trying to steady her nerves, she tapped out a reply to Laura. "Where are you? Is everyone okay?" After a few tense seconds, she received only a broken text. "We're in... locked door." Then nothing more. The message ended abruptly, leaving her with more questions than answers. She glanced around for a hint of what might have happened before she arrived. The tree lights blinked in a merry pattern, casting moving shadows that made her skin crawl. On the kitchen counter, she spotted half-chopped vegetables, as though someone had been interrupted mid-prep. The fridge door stood slightly ajar, leaking cool air into the house. A sudden noise echoed from the second floor, a muffled thump, like a piece of furniture being knocked over. Adrenaline surged, every nerve tingling. Amelia looked toward the staircase, draped with festive garlands that now felt more ominous than cheerful. She took a tentative step forward, phone in hand. Another thump followed, then silence. Outside, the figure remained still. Was he alone out there? And what, or who, was lurking upstairs? Amelia swallowed, torn between the fear of confronting the unknown and her concern for her missing friends. "Laura," she called, voice trembling. Only the muted hum of holiday lights answered her. This was supposed to be a night of celebration, yet an eerie tension had seized the house. Amelia's only clue was the repeated thump upstairs, and she felt compelled to find out what it was before it found her. Amelia stood at the base of the staircase, the holiday garlands overhead swaying slightly in an unseen draft. The muffled thump from above lingered in her mind, like an alarm warning her not to go any farther. Yet, concern for Laura and the other guests outweighed her fear. She ascended slowly, each step creaking under her weight. The lights on the banister flickered, casting dancing shadows across the walls. The hallway at the top was dim, lit only by a single strand of Christmas lights plugged into a socket near a closed bedroom door. A faint smell of pine and something metallic filled the air. She paused by the first door, Laura's parents' old study. It stood ajar, revealing a tidy desk and bookshelves lined with holiday figurines. No sign of life. Further down, Amelia heard soft scuffling, as if someone was moving around carefully. She pressed her ear to the second door. Silence. Then another bump, closer this time, like someone pushing a heavy box. Steeling herself, she grasped the doorknob. It was locked. "Laura?" she whispered. When no reply came, her stomach twisted. If Laura and the others were in there, why wouldn't they answer? A sudden vibration jolted her phone in her pocket. She scrambled to read the new text. "He's outside, but there might be more." Her heart clutched at that last phrase. There might be more. More of who? Or what? Downstairs, the front door rattled violently, as if someone tested the locked handle. Instinctively, Amelia backed away from the bedroom door, her pulse pounding in her ears. Could the person outside have decided to break in? She hurried to the top of the stairs, listening hard. The rattling stopped just as abruptly as it began. Goosebumps prickled her arms. Whoever had tried the door was apparently skilled at vanishing into silence. Amelia's mind raced. Was she trapped upstairs with someone else? Was the silhouette a decoy for a different intruder? Desperate for a plan, she returned to the locked bedroom door. She lifted a trembling hand and knocked softly. If anyone was inside, she needed them to know she was here, that she wasn't the threat. The house felt like a ticking clock, each second fraught with danger lurking in both the shadows and the silent, snowy world beyond. For a moment, Amelia thought she heard a faint shuffle behind the locked door, almost like an anxious whisper. She pressed her ear closer, straining to catch any sound. Nothing. Could her mind be playing tricks on her? Her pulse pounded as she glanced back toward the staircase. The house had fallen unnervingly quiet. Steeling her nerves, she backed up and tried the other rooms. The bathroom door swung open easily, revealing only the usual toiletries and a half-folded towel. The spare bedroom lay in darkness, scattered with boxes of holiday decorations. Nothing out of place, no clues to where Laura and the others could be. A soft, scraping noise suddenly echoed from the hallway. Amelia's heart jumped. She whirled around, phone flashlight in hand, illuminating the corridor. The garlands on the banister drifted slightly as if brushed by invisible fingers. Then came a whisper, so close she almost felt it on her skin. "Amelia." Her name carried through the air, too soft to identify the speaker. She gasped, stepping back. "Laura?" she breathed, barely louder than a whisper. No response came. Downstairs, the Christmas tree lights blinked in their cheerful pattern, mocking her fear. Amelia tiptoed to the top of the stairs, peering over the banister. A silhouette stood near the living room archway. A person in a dark coat, features masked by the low light. Definitely not Laura. They seemed to sense her presence, turning their head ever so slightly upward. Panic surged. The intruder had gotten in? Or had they been inside all along? Amelia flicked off her phone flashlight, hoping not to be seen. She shrank back against the wall, heart pounding so hard she feared it would give her away. In the hush, she heard that single note chime, again from somewhere outside, as if signaling the figure. This time, the note felt closer, more insistent. Amelia's phone vibrated, lighting her face in a quick flash. She fumbled to silence it, terrified of drawing attention, but one question throbbed in her mind. Did she dare rush past this stranger to escape, or continue searching for her friends in a house that felt more haunted with each passing second? Amelia pressed herself flat against the hallway wall, her breathing shallow. The silhouette in the living room remained eerily still, its head tilted slightly, as if listening. Every instinct screamed for her to run, but her legs felt rooted to the spot. Her phone buzzed again, the vibrations impossibly loud in the oppressive silence. She pulled it out quickly, shielding the screen with her hand. Another message from Laura lit up the display. "Do not come downstairs. Stay quiet. He's looking for someone." Amelia's stomach churned. Someone? Who? She wanted to scream, but fear clamped her throat shut. The figure below began moving, their slow, deliberate steps clicking faintly against the hardwood floor. They walked toward the dining table, pausing as if scanning the room for something, or someone. She thought about the locked door upstairs. If Laura and the others were hiding there, why hadn't they opened it? Why weren't they letting her in? She tightened her grip on her phone, fighting the rising tide of panic. Then, without warning, the figure stopped at the base of the stairs. They didn't look up. Instead, they knelt down and placed something on the floor, a small box wrapped in shiny red paper with a gold bow on top. The person lingered for a moment, brushing the ribbon with gloved fingers before turning and heading toward the front door. Amelia blinked, her mind racing. What was in the box? She stayed frozen, not daring to move until the soft creak of the door signaled the figure's departure. She rushed to the banister, peering over. The front door hung ajar, letting in a gust of cold air and faint snowflakes. Outside, the street lamp flickered, and she saw the silhouette once more, retreating into the snowy night. Relief flooded her for a moment, until she realized the door hadn't closed completely. The cold air sent a shiver down her spine, and the red box gleamed faintly in the flickering light. Whatever had been left behind wasn't a gift, it felt like a warning. A new sound broke the quiet, a faint creak of floorboards behind her, coming from the locked room. Her blood ran cold. She turned slowly, her flashlight trembling in her hand. Someone, or something, was standing in the shadows of the hallway, just beyond the edge of her light. Amelia's flashlight trembled as she slowly raised it, the beam slicing through the darkness. At the far end of the hallway, just outside the locked room, stood another figure. Unlike the one downstairs, this person wasn't wearing a coat. Their clothes were dark and featureless, blending almost seamlessly with the shadows. They stood motionless, head tilted slightly as if observing her. "Laura?" Amelia whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it shifted ever so slightly, one foot scraping against the floorboards. The faint sound echoed unnaturally in the otherwise silent house. Amelia's grip on her phone tightened as her mind raced for options. Should she run past them? Lock herself in another room? Call out for help? Then, to her horror, the figure raised a hand and pointed. Not at her, but toward the red box downstairs. Her breath caught in her throat. What was this? Some kind of sick game? Summoning her courage, Amelia took a step back, putting more distance between herself and the figure. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "Where are my friends?" Still no reply. Instead, the figure began moving forward, slowly, deliberately, with a grace that felt deeply unnatural. Amelia stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the garland draped along the banister. Her flashlight flickered, and for a heart-stopping moment, the hallway plunged into darkness. When the light returned, the figure was gone. Panic clawed at her chest as she scanned the corridor. "Laura?" she called again, desperation lacing her voice. No answer. Downstairs, the front door creaked loudly as it swung shut. Amelia's head snapped toward the sound, and she caught sight of the red box again. Its shiny paper gleamed ominously, almost as if it were beckoning her. Against her better judgment, she descended the stairs, every creak of the steps sending a fresh jolt of fear through her. As she reached the bottom, her phone buzzed one last time. The message from Laura was chillingly clear. "Whatever you do, don't touch the box." Amelia froze, her hand hovering inches from the package. Her breath caught as a faint chuckle drifted from somewhere in the house. Low, raspy, and far too close. Amelia's hand shot back instinctively, trembling as she stared at the red box. Laura's warning echoed in her mind. Don't touch the box. But why? What was inside? Her fear screamed for her to leave it alone, yet curiosity pulled at her like a thread unraveling her common sense. The chuckle came again, this time louder, its source indiscernible. It seemed to echo from every corner of the house. Amelia spun around, scanning the room, but she saw nothing, just the eerie flicker of the Christmas tree lights and the empty, quiet living room. A sudden knock rattled the front door, loud and insistent. Amelia jumped, her nerves fraying further. Her phone buzzed again, and she snatched it up, half expecting another cryptic text. Instead, it was a call from an unknown number. Hands shaking, she answered. A voice, strained, trembling, and unmistakably Laura's, whispered through the line, "Amelia, leave. Right now. The box is for you." Amelia's blood ran cold. "Laura, where are you? What's going on?" she pleaded, her voice cracking. But Laura didn't answer. The line went dead, leaving Amelia alone with the knock still echoing in her ears. The box seemed to gleam brighter in the dim light, an unnatural aura that sent a wave of nausea through her. Gathering what courage she could muster, Amelia edged toward the front door. She had to leave, to escape this nightmare. But as she reached for the handle, she froze. The box began to hum softly, emitting a low vibration that reverberated through the floorboards. It wasn't just a gift. It was something alive, something unnatural. A faint voice, distorted and otherworldly, began whispering from the box. "Open it, Amelia. It's time." Tears pricked her eyes as she backed away. Suddenly, the lights in the house flared, blinding her momentarily and then cut out completely. Darkness consumed her, broken only by the faint glow of the box, now pulsing like a heartbeat. Amelia turned and ran, blindly stumbling toward the back door. She fumbled with the lock, finally wrenching it open and fleeing into the snowy night. The icy wind burned her skin, but she didn't stop running until she reached the end of the street, where a neighbor's porch light offered some semblance of safety. Behind her, the house loomed, its windows dark and foreboding. The red box was now visible through the living room window, its glow piercing the gloom. She never saw Laura or any of the other guests again. The police found no sign of a struggle, no evidence of foul play, just the house, eerily empty, with the red box sitting untouched beneath the flickering Christmas tree. To this day, Amelia can't explain what happened that night, but every Christmas Eve, she hears that same single chime echoing faintly, a haunting reminder of the box she left behind, and the unanswered question of what might have happened if she had dared to open it.